Okay, well, thank you so much for being here today, Hollis, and it's good to see you again. Thanks for reminding me about our bingo game at Casey. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, I really appreciate you getting to spend some time with us today and share your stories. Thanks for watching some of the previous episodes as well. We've had some really cool folks on. I know you mentioned you saw Jillian's episode, and that was a really fun one to do. So I'm glad you're here today to add your insights as well, because everyone has such a unique story, and
Mhm.
get to have the fun of listening to these unique insights and adventures along the way. So it would be great to kind of hear a bit about your journey and how you've gotten to where you are in your career today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and first and foremost, thank you so much for having me, Imran. It's really great to be here. And I mean, I guess I would say buckle up because it's been a bit of a weird ride.
All right.
And for context, just so we know where the story, let's start at the ending. I'm currently the executive director of the Center for Career Design at the Schulich School of Business, as my virtual background says. So keep that in mind, kind of as we're going through this journey. But yeah, many years ago, I went to a great undergraduate business program, finished that off. And at that time, a lot of my classmates were opting to pursue kind of what I would consider more traditional roles coming out of a business undergrad, right? Finance, consulting, accounting, those types of things. And I had always had it in my mind, that I wanted to work in advertising. So not marketing, not like a brand manager at a big CPG, but advertising specifically, like Don Draper style.
I was thinking,
Um, yeah, and something where I felt like I would have a hand in kind of stewarding the creative process and get to work on a really wide variety of clients. And I think at the heart of it, what I wanted was to have a job that I sort of perceived to be cool. And let's keep in mind that at this point in time, I was 21, 22. So I ended up landing my first job out of my undergrad at an agency whose work was really rooted, largely in sponsorships and promotions. So
okay.
I worked on, a major financial institution, a major CPG brand, a pet health company, pretty broad swath of industries, and really was able to kind of cut my teeth in advertising there and in specifically the world of account management. Simultaneously, I was working weekends doing a bit of production assistant work in the music world. So that had
Well,
really piqued my interest as someone who'd always loved live music. And so I was working small gigs, big concerts, festivals. And I think a lot of what made me successful in that PA role were some of the skills that I picked up from my day job, relating to clear and concise communication, time management, being a good listener, being able to, take an action direction. When you have a hand in putting on a live show, whether it's a concert or a brand activation, these are all kind of fundamental skills to have a grasp on. So when an account management opportunity arose at an agency that specifically connected bands and brands, obviously I jumped at the opportunity. I thought, this is perfect. This is ideal. I can sort of merge these two areas of interest into one. And ultimately, I was in that job for 4 months before I decided to leave. It was a really fun position. I had a lot of autonomy. I got to go on tour with the band Green Day, all really
no
good things.
way.
But
That's unbelievable.
ultimately, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, it just blew my mind. That's unbelievable. I'm seeing them play this August.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
one of
they're
my
great
favorite
guys.
bands. So I'm gonna have a ton of questions about that. Sorry to interrupt you. That's just so.
No, totally cool, totally cool. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was like a brief. I shouldn't exaggerate here. I wasn't like on a world tour with them. It was some Canadian dates, specifically in support of a brand activation, but still very cool experience. All really good things, but ultimately I wasn't happy. Something about that work environment just wasn't suited to my sensibilities. I think what it was, looking back on it, is there was a bit of a lack of structure that I didn't realize I needed to thrive until I didn't have it. And again, who at 21, 22 wants to hear that like structure is what you need and structure is what's going to make you successful? But this is kind of like starting to creep into my headspace. So I fast forward to my next role. I ended up back at an agency that was focused on, this time, licensing and promotions. So we worked with a lot of the major film studios, Sony, Paramount, Fox, what have you. So we've moved from music to movies, but still, I'm working in an area that I perceive to be cool. I had a really great boss and mentor that taught me a lot about sales specifically. and a small but really solid team of great coworkers. And I was there for a couple of years, but what I learned there, though, in addition to structure, I needed an office of more than 3 people. I needed a bigger team to really be able to sort of show up as my best self, to have that kind of collaborative environment that I need to thrive. And so after a couple of years, I ended up getting poached by my boss from the very first agency that I worked at to come and work at a bigger experiential shop, specifically on that same financial institution that I'd started on years before. And so, yeah, I made that move. And ultimately, that was the last agency that I worked at. And there, I had a really great time in a lot of ways. I learned a ton. I worked with a lot of great people, developed some lifelong friendships. I met my now husband there, which was pretty great. But, it's, a little office romance. But I also realized something I think pretty fundamental, and that was that I didn't frankly like the work. I'd spent all of these years, and I was objectively good at my job. I got regular promotions, accolades, really never a bad performance review, but really didn't like the work. Nothing about it was feeling cool to me anymore. And this really was sort of crystallized, and it dawned on me when I was running an activation for a toothpaste brand at Yonge Dundas Square in Toronto, so a very public location. And I was stressing out about the installation of like a 30-foot tall prop molar, right? Like it was just not it. It's this giant tooth, and I'm losing sleep over it. And I was just going, what is happening here? How did I get to this spot? And it was a bit of a tough pill to swallow, that just because you're good at something, and again, you've received those promotions and different job opportunities have come up, it doesn't mean that you should be doing it or that you have to do it. And I think once I'd kind of sat in that for a little bit, I did what any reasonable person would do. And I went back and got my MBA. That's always a great way to leave a job. You're not just quitting, I'm pursuing higher education, right? So went back, did my MBA at Schulich, actually, where I now work. Shout out to the Schulich MBA program. And coming out of the MBA, I once again, I think, took a little bit of a less traditional path than a lot of my classmates. So what I'd realized through my pre-MBA work is that a lot of the time I had been selling or marketing goods, and they weren't always goods that I could personally get behind or get really excited about. But what I could get excited about were meaningful services. So services that could change a person's life for the better. And that's how I ended up at Second City Works, which is the corporate training arm of, I think, the pretty well-known and legendary improvisational theater, the Second City. So yeah, I went on to work there selling improv courses and workshops to all manner of Fortune 500 clients. And this was work that I could really get behind. There's a number of really fundamental tenets of improv that can really help corporate teams stay sort of connected, engaged, and performing at their highest potential. And I saw how transformational this service was for people, myself included. So by all accounts, the work itself, the product was great. But again, something was still missing for me. And I think it goes back to the structure piece, that I knew intrinsically that I needed to thrive, but that I'd sort of been clouded by this Second City opportunity. And, it was a small office, not a lot of process, and my type A personality really struggled with that, which is ultimately how I got here to my current employer, which is a university. You want process and protocol, come work for a university. I've been at York for about 9 years now in roles on the recruitment and admissions and student services side. And as I mentioned off the top, now leading our faculty's career center. And, really my journey here has just been a culmination of all the learnings about myself that I've had along the way. So that original transition from Second City Works to York University isn't really as large a leap as you might think. Effectively, I just took everything that I'd learned about selling corporate training packages, those fundamental tenets of improv, and kind of parlayed it into a role where I sold undergraduate and master's degrees. And now my students are the product, right? And my team and I sell them to our corporate partners. You want really talented employees, come and recruit Schulich students. So I think this very long-winded story, and thank you for entertaining me. The key takeaway for me is that I really genuinely don't believe that we're static. We're always evolving, always learning, always growing. And it's really important not to, hold yourself to who you are today in the present moment to sort of visions and ideas that were made by a version of yourself who didn't have the expertise and insights and all those experiences that your current self does. You know, now all these years later, I'm a mom of two small kids. I don't think that I could be working on the production side of the music industry, for example, and touring the world and still give my kids the life and stability that I want for them. So yeah, it's been a really winding path, but I'm super happy with where I am today, and I don't doubt that there's going to be sort of further twists and turns down to the road, and I'm excited to see what comes next.
Oh, that I am always going to ask this question, Hollis, because I did not get that from the bingo card we did. This background, that is incredible. On a personal note, like that's a huge area of passion for me is music, the arts, film. I have tons of friends from that industry. Um, yeah, as I mentioned, I'm going to see Green Day play later this year, one of my favorite bands. But so interesting to hear that you kind of you went all in. You know, you were in that industry and then decided that it wasn't for you. Um, so many times when I discuss job seekers with folks, I think I primarily focus on one segment of job seekers, and that's a segment that is, you know, new to the workforce or in a survival job and trying to get to a place they want to be. But I haven't often had the chance to talk to, you know, the segment that is in a role and doing well, like you said, um, but isn't necessarily happy, you know, even though they're doing well. So how did you kind of identify that you needed that structure? Were there resources you used to figure that out, or that was just sort of introspection and sort of you reflecting on what you were looking for? Because that's really insightful as well.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of, I don't think it's something that I ever didn't know about myself. I think it's something that I was trying to shove really far down and say, it's not important. You know, I would rather the cool, shiny thing, and I'll just work around the fact that this lack of structure or this lack of process or the fact that the office is only three people wearing a million different hats. I can gloss over that because the work's really cool. But there was always something just kind of chirping, going, you know, it's not really who you are, and it's not really how you're putting yourself in a position to show up as your best self. So I think it was a lot of years of just this kind of inner tumult and, you know, talking it out with friends and family and complaining and moaning, and eventually you sort of sit up one day and go, I'm tired of complaining and moaning. Like, I know what the solution is here, and it's something that, you know, maybe it's not cool to like structure, but that's what I need to succeed and to thrive. And since finding myself in an environment that provides me with that, leaps and bounds, you know, I've been able to do amazing things, amazing, cool, creative things for our student community, because I have had that foundation that gives me the sense of comfort and sort of internal peace, to be able to let my brain really go loose in terms of, you know, some of the more creative programming or ideas that I've had in the world of recruitment and admissions, student services, or now career design.
That is super helpful, and thank you for sharing that, Hollis. It's such a specific, um, sort of discovery, I think, about yourself that I think a lot of people will resonate with, myself included. It's a really interesting insight to kind of recognize that need for structure. And I know the world of entrepreneurship very well,
Mm-hmm.
and it is extremely exciting, but that need for structure and you know, some parameters is really interesting to hear you talk about. So thank you for sharing that insight.
Yeah,
Um,
my pleasure.
I'm sure, you know, students who come to you with an interest in the arts must be super lucky as well. Do you, like, in the program that you support, are there students coming with an interest in, you know, the arts or the field, like that industry, music, film, or have you come across any in your work?
Yeah, so on both sides. So at Schulich, it's actually really cool. We are our MBA program specifically. There's a variety of different areas of specialization within the program, but one is, and you know, I believe first of its kind in Canada, the arts, media, and entertainment specialization. So specifically, students will come to do our MBA to pursue that specialization if they have an interest in one day working for the TSO or the COC or something like that. So absolutely, yeah, we get students like that all the time, and I have had the opportunity to have conversations with them either at the point of admission when we're having these sort of recruitment conversations about what that journey could look like, or now on the back end as they're going out and looking for jobs. And the one thing about that group in particular that I find really interesting is on the career side of things, it is so passion driven. You know, there was a student recently who a colleague of mine was working with on the career advising side that was negotiating a role with a large recording label, a large record label. And, you know, I think if you were to look at the details of the contract and the sort of, you know, the financial aspect of it, like, sure, great job, but not necessarily perhaps financially what you would expect an MBA to be satisfied with walking out the door making. But this is a student that was excited that they had been able to parlay their business education and combine their passion for the arts into exactly the role that sort of served them and filled their cup. Regardless of what and I'm not saying that the compensation was poor, but, you know, we're not talking about an MBB consulting role kind of salary, right?
Right.
But this is somebody that they'd achieved their goal. They're working in the arts or will be working in the arts at a place that they really wanted to be at. And so, yeah, they're always an interesting group to work with because I think a lot of the times the things that drive and motivate them are different than what you might expect of a typical business student.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I ask, is it's just it's a unique opportunity to get to talk to someone with industry experience, who might be able to provide guidance to, it's as I've always known, a very competitive field. Even if you're looking to, not be an artist, but be someone who is on the production side, to be involved with labels or studios, extremely competitive. And I know it's something many students aspire to do.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have insights for, those students that might be watching, when it comes to, networking or helping themselves stand out? Is that something that you might be able to share some insights on?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say sort of specifically to the music industry or the film industry. You know, again, this is a past life of me. I would not say that I still have, you know, relevant connections there, but I think the lessons are still broadly applicable and in that networking is hugely important. And we talk about networking all the time. You know, we just wrapped up our summer orientation for our programs that start in May, and obviously the Center for Career Design presented there. And I can't count the number of times that myself or my team members said the word networking. But it is so important, right? To put yourself out there to understand the landscape of the industry that you're looking to break into, to have those informal connections and conversations with people at all levels of the industry that you want to step into, and really just sort of keep yourself top of mind. Be curious. I think one of the biggest things, you know, networking sometimes can come across as scary to people. It's not. It's a learned skill for many. It was a learned skill for myself. I by no means claim to be an expert. You know, for some people that have the gift of the gab, great, they've got this on lock. But that's not the majority of people. And so I think instead of looking at it as you know, networking, look at it as just fostering your curiosity. Do your research, ask questions, be interested in what people have to say. You know, be a good listener when people are offering you advice. And this is coming back to some of those fundamental tenets of improv I talked about earlier, right? Like, you need to be an active listener. You need to listen to understand, not just listen to respond to someone. So there's so many different things that go into networking that I think are very much learned skills that people can practice. You know, one simple exercise that we do with our students is we'll have them during orientation, turn to the person on your left or your right, and just keep them talking for a minute, right? Ask questions. People love to talk about themselves. And, you know, the first question you ask shouldn't be, what jobs are available at your company, right? Like, that's probably not the best way to ingratiate yourself to someone. So really working on the art of just the casual conversation, I genuinely believe will serve students interested in any industry really, really well.
I 100% agree, and I think that's a great point as well, to not make that your first question, um, because it doesn't really show you the genuine interest you might have in providing some kind of value or helping them solve some kind of problem. But it's interesting you mentioned this, um, use of improv, because that is something that I did a lot of, throughout my years in school. Whenever there was a chance to do something like that, I gravitated towards that. And I have to agree, it's played a major role in my ability to meet people and find opportunities. And is that something you still recommend to students today, is to try to
Oh yeah,
use take a course like that or do something in that space?
for sure. So I'm always kind of chirping on about, can we incorporate it into any of our programs? Can we offer workshops? We do have a professional development course in our. It's core to some of our curriculum, depending on the program, and an elective in other cases. But there is a component of that course where there's a session specifically focused on improv. But yeah, I think it's amazing. Go out and, if you can, if you have the means, spend a couple $100 and take the 8 or 12 week improv course. It is not going to do you a disservice in any way, shape, or form. It's really going to help you with, again, your communication, with your ability to think in terms of ensemble, not just think in terms of yourself and your own priorities. There's so many great lessons to be learned there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would second that for those watching this one. It's definitely one of those things that can be intimidating, like networking, but it's a group of people that's also, excited and ready to have fun. It's well worth checking out if you've never been to one of those before. I would 100% agree, Hollis. And I do find it's the kind of thing that will help even in, an interview setting,
Oh yeah.
because suddenly you're so much more able to kind of pull your ideas together and just express yourself. And have you noticed anything that is working well for students in an interview setting today? I know it's something that a lot of students are, again, nervous about, but you kind of touched on it a little bit when you said, if you go in there asking for jobs, it's kind of about you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but in an interview setting, are you noticing students do anything that's really working well when they get the chance to speak about themselves?
Yeah, I think it's really just finding, outside of obviously answering the questions that are asked of you, it's finding those moments in the interview to just relate at more of a human level, right? And find those points of connection. Because again, I think, when I think about our students, technically they're very savvy, right? Whether they're MBA students or they're a student from our Master of Business Analytics program, right? They have the technical skills. But I'm sure you've hired people in your lifetime. I've hired a lot of people. I, when I'm screening resumes, I've already screened out the people that don't have the technical skills. So I'm talking to a pool of people that I know technically can do the job. I want to find out, is this someone that I want to work with? Is this someone that's going to gel well with my team? If I'm hiring for a management role, is this someone that sort of has some of those intrinsic leadership skills and is going to be able to really move the dial on the team that they're managing? And those are things that, like, yes, they will come out depending on the interview questions that you're asked. But I do think a lot of it also comes out in some of the conversations that you have on the way to the elevator, or at the end of the interview when it's a little bit less formal and you're having the opportunity just to pose questions of your own or share some things about yourself that maybe didn't get covered in the interview. So don't think that just because you're not actively answering a tell me about a time question that you're not still being interviewed.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. And I like how you phrased it, to try to connect at a human level. I think people sometimes forget these are just other people, you know,
Totally.
yeah, just trying to solve a problem and find people that will work well with them. And it's kind of, goes back to what you were saying earlier. They're trying to figure out, is this someone that's going to work well in a small company where you do wear multiple hats, or in a company where there's a lot of structure? And, that's part of what's happening in there. It's not just like you're saying, proving you have the technical knowledge. So, um, just again, pulling insights from what you shared earlier, Hollis, it's again a a unique opportunity to talk to someone with this much experience. So thank you for sharing that. And have you started to notice kind of, in the role you're in now, opportunities that might be on the horizon for students going through the Schulich program? So kind of emerging fields, emerging roles, skill sets that are in demand, anything like that that might be worth making people aware of, if they're trying to find new opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of one of the big areas is obviously anything in terms of AI, digital innovation, that entire space. We just launched in fall of 2024 an MBA in technology leadership. So it's a specific MBA focusing, our short form for it is we refer to it as the tech MBA. So specifically focusing on that area and skill set. We have a master's of management in artificial intelligence. So really, I think these are quite clearly the areas where we're going to see more and more opportunity. That said, I think there's also the through line of sustainability, right? That's a huge focus. It doesn't matter what industry you're working in. Everybody wants a more sustainable future for our planet, for our children, for all of these things. And so I think, keeping yourself apprised of kind of what's going on in that space in the industry that you're interested in is always going to serve you well. So yeah, it is hard to predict at the speed at which just the world is moving, what the next big thing is going to be. But I think, you're certainly right now, you're doing yourself a disadvantage if you don't have at least some fluency with what's going on in the AI space in particular.
Yeah, that's a good reminder as well. It's easy to kind of want to resist the change or hope things stay the same in some places. Kind of, especially in the arts, I know there's a lot of concern around that, but embracing it and finding ways to be creative with it is, like you said, going to be an advantage, especially in the future when things, I think, continue to accelerate. So, yeah, I appreciate that insight as well. Another question that just kind of came to mind, you've mentioned these incredible programs at York. And I know what an amazing school this is. I also know it's a competitive school and competitive programs to get into. So for students who might be watching this and thinking of applying, whether it be for an MBA or one of these other programs, do you have advice for how to make their application stand out or anything along those lines?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll put my recruitment hat back on. So yeah, at Schulich, we are the business faculty at York, and we offer an undergraduate program, a couple different MBA programs, and then we are up to 9 one-year masters. So those specialized masters, ranging anywhere, as I mentioned, from AI to our recently launched masters in health industry administration. So really, whatever the interest, we probably have a program for you that focuses on sort of the business of that interest. But in terms of the application process, my advice would be pretty consistent no matter what program you're applying for. Obviously, grades matter, work experience matters depending on the program that you're applying for, but you do have the opportunity to write your personal statement. If you're applying to our undergraduate program, we're going to ask about your leadership skills and things that you've done to demonstrate that. And it kind of, again, comes back to that human connection. Just show up authentically. Don't tell us what you think we want to hear as a business school. Don't repeat back to me what's written on our website. Myself or one of my team members probably wrote the copy on the program page that you're looking at. I want to understand, or my colleagues in recruitment want to understand, your authentic reason for wanting to pursue this degree. And, if that stems from a personal story, tell us the personal story, right? You also have the opportunity on the graduate side to submit, obviously, you have to submit your personal statement. And then there's an optional essay where you can share additional information or context if you feel it's relevant. And sometimes, we have people that there's a gap in their resume, right? Tell us about the gap, and don't be afraid to tell us why the gap is there. Maybe you were caring for a family member that was ill. Maybe you are, you're a mom and you took a couple of years off to raise your kids when they were little. That's fine. That's part of who you are. And we want to know about the whole you, right? We want the complete picture. That's how we can sort of best assess how you're going to fit into the overall cast of characters that we're admitting to our program. So really, I mean, it's easy to say, be authentic, but I think it's sometimes hard for people to do because they maybe have a preconceived notion of what a business program in particular wants to hear from its applicants. But I promise you, we want to know why you're interested and why you think you'd be a good fit and how this program is going to benefit you and your personal goals long term.
That is super clarifying, Hollis. And again, it just connects to this idea you've kind of expressed throughout the interview of doing things that are right for you and being genuine. And I do think people sometimes will, think, oh, I need to make sure I hit all the keywords that are in the application.
Mm.
That becomes the guiding light instead of um, being authentic. And I think you presented it very tangibly. So for those listening again, I hope you take that advice, use that optional essay. Don't miss the chance to tell more of your story. Um, and I know we're at the end of the time I asked you for today, Hollis, so it went quicker than expected. But I really appreciate you joining us today to share these stories and insights. Is there anything you would like to say before we wrap this episode up, in terms of career guidance, things you've learned, or any sort of final thoughts you'd like to share with folks watching this one?
I mean, I think that the one final thing that I'll leave you on, and I suppose it's a bit of a plug for a colleague, but I think it ties in really nicely to kind of some of the themes that we've addressed here. There's an article that was recently published by one of our organizational behavior professors, Stephen Friedman. It was recently published in the Harvard Business Review, and the title of the article is very blunt. It's "Your Career Doesn't Need to Have Purpose." And I would highly recommend that anybody listening read this, because I think it's something that I wish, 20 years ago that I had read. And, something I pulled a quote from it because I really did enjoy it. One of the things that he says is, "The roles that you take on early in your career are typically not grandiose or imbued with deep worldly significance. And there's nothing wrong with that. The trick is to make work meaningful by making it a part of your exploration, as opposed to expecting a job to fulfill your entire reason for being." So I thought that was kind of a nice sentiment to leave things off on here. And yeah, I definitely recommend checking out the article. It's a great read.
Absolutely. We'll link to that article for those who want to read it. I'm going to read it myself. Thanks for letting us know about that one, Hollis. And thank you again for the time today. Really cool to hear your story. Extremely enlightening to hear your insights. And I hope we can have you back on in the future.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day. Thank you again for spending some time with us. And we'll hope to see you soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Imran.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one.